Moving right along, there's an opinion piece in the New York Times this morning about Justice Breyer should retire right now. Justice Breyer. And the reason for it is written by Paul Campos. He's a law professor, and he writes extensively about politics and the Constitution, so the man knows what he's talking about. But he writes that Justice Ginsburg was widely and deservedly criticized for her refusal to retire from the Supreme Court at a time when a Democratic president could have chosen her replacement. Well, I disagree with that statement to begin with, because there was, I guess what Mr. Campos is referring to, yeah, she should have retired when Barack Obama was still president, before the orange bastard was made the leader of the free world. But anyway, let's move on. Justice Stephen Breyer is making a similar, and according to Campos, arguably even more egregious mistake. And he writes this, quote, "The evident indifference on the part of Democrats regarding the failure of Justice Breyer, who is 82, to announce his retirement is apparently a product of the assumption that he will do so at some point during the current Congress, and therefore whether he does so anytime soon is not particularly important." Okay, but as Campos also writes, that is a grave mistake. Why? Well, just take a look at the makeup of the United States Senate. The Democrats control it by virtue of the Vice President of the United States. And the shift of a single seat from the Democrats to the Republicans, or even one vacancy in the 50 seats now controlled by the Democratic caucus, would probably result in the very quick reinstallation of Mitch McConnell as a majority leader. Think about, if you would, gentle listener, a state that is controlled by a Republican governor, but has at least one Democratic senator. And let's supposing for whatever reason in that state, that Democratic senator decides not to be a senator any longer or keels over dead. The Republican governor can then appoint, ta-da, a Republican senator. You see, we don't have to wait till 2022 for this kind of bullshit to happen. So that's what we are faced with. And if the balance in the Supreme Court is not soon rectified, this country is doomed. I guess we all know that. So anyway, as Campos writes, what are the odds of something like this, a senator's death or disabling health crisis or departure from office for other reasons? Maybe he was caught in bed with a Catholic priest. What are the odds that something like that will happen sometime in this Congress's remaining 22 months? That's all they have left. And he goes on to answer his own question that, alarmingly for Democrats, if history is any guide, the odds are quite high that something like that will happen. He uses a statistic here. He says, since the end of World War II, 27 of the 38 Congresses have featured a change in the party composition of the Senate during a session. So 27 out of 38. Well, I mean, that's what, 60% or higher? The probability that this sort of shift may occur within this Congress, the one that's sitting now, may be even higher than that. Because, like I mentioned a second ago, at the moment, no fewer than 6 Democratic senators over the age of 70 represent states where a Republican governor would then be free to replace them with a Republican senator should a vacancy occur. And we know what would happen then, don't we? Now, there are 5 other Democratic senators who represent states for which a vacancy would go unfilled for months until a special election to fill the seat was held, which would hand the Christian Fascist Party control of the Senate at least until that election, and likely for the rest of the current Congress, if a Republican wins that contest. So, all things considered, as Campos writes, the odds that Democrats will lose control of the Senate in the next 22 months are probably close enough to be considered a coin flip. Only in this particular sort of coin flip, friends, it would be heads, the Christian fascists win, tails, we lose. We being normal people. So, under these circumstances, as Campos points out, the Democrats... for Democrats to run the very real risk that they would be unable to replace Justice Breyer is unacceptable. Of course, the only person in a position to ensure that that doesn't happen is, right, Justice Breyer himself. And Campos adds this: it is true that under normal circumstances, a Supreme Court justice planning to retire generally waits until the end of a court term to do so, but these are not and haven't been for a long time normal circumstances. Because nothing illustrates the anti-democratic, small d, the anti-democratic dysfunction of our political system right now more clearly than the current makeup of the Supreme Court. 2/3, 6 of the sitting justices were nominated by Republican presidents, even though Republican presidential candidates have lost the popular vote in 7 of the last 9 elections. Elections which determined who nominated those justices. I mean, this is not confusing. This is not a numbers game. These are simply raw, observable facts. And these justices were confirmed by a Senate that has become so skewed radically in favor of electing Republicans that the 50 senators who do caucus as Democrats represent about 41.5 million more Americans than the 50 Republican senators do. That's how our system is no longer what it has purported to be from the very beginning. I realize it wasn't what it's purported to be from the very beginning. But even now, where it concerns the legislative branch, and as a consequence of the legislative branch, the judicial branch, things are not what they appear to be. So, under the circumstances, as Campos points out, it would be a travesty if the Supreme Court seat occupied by Justice Breyer was not filled by a replacement chosen by Democrats. Amen. So, what's the answer? Very simple. Breyer should announce his retirement immediately, effective upon the confirmation of his successor. And you can make the argument that for Breyer to continue to make the same gamble that Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg made and lost runs the risk of tainting Justice Breyer's legacy as a justice and has the potential to be an anti-democratic disaster for the nation as a whole. It's all right there, staring us in the face. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcast. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.